So it's that time when we go back to the newspapers. Here with us all morning to review the papers have been Marianne Hotter and Yasmin Alibhai-Brown, and they join me again now. So welcome back to you too. We've dealt with quite a few papers around inside the papers this weekend. Marianne, another one that's taken your interest that we're going to kick off this section with is the pay packet of the Bet365 boss.
Yeah, so this is a woman called Denise Coates. She set up Bet365, the online gambling company, by starting off in Stoke-on-Trent with the family's betting shop company, and said, I think the future of gambling is online, bought a domain and built the company from there. She's now one of the top paid executives in the whole world. Last year, so the year just gone, she got £213 million salary, and then at least 50% of the £100 million dividend that the company paid out to its shareholders. She's a majority shareholder. That is an awful lot of money. That's just under £1 million a day she's being paid. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm sure Denise Coates works very hard, but does she work £1 million a day hard? This is off the back of research, a kind of a study that came out. Someone had crunched the numbers and worked out that the bosses of the biggest companies in the UK made more in 2023 by Thursday afternoon, just gone, than the average worker will earn for the whole of the year. Bear in mind that the median UK income at the moment, so the sort of average UK income is about 33 grand. It's quite staggering, really, Anna, because you kind of think everybody should get paid a fair wage for a fair day's work. And, of course, there are certain, roles that only one person can do, and maybe that carries a premium. But I do think we live in a very strange sort of Alice in Wonderland world where someone who's perhaps a specialist nurse is qualifying on, 20-something thousand pounds a year or 30-something thousand pounds a year, and someone who's running a company may well be looking at a 6 or 7 figure salary. Because I just think the system is a little bit broken, because there's nothing that suggests that anybody could do anything that warrants that level of remuneration.
The one thing that people might say is if a successful business will employ lots of people and give people work, is that a sort of fair defence to say that it's someone who's generating money for other people, potentially?
Yes, possibly. So Bet365 are expanding. They've now employed just over 6,000 people. And one of the things that I think is pretty cool about what Denise Coates did is that she sort of made a promise to Stoke-on-Trent that she would continue to headquarter the operations there. They weren't going to move to a bigger city, Manchester or London or somewhere. So they're still based in Stoke-on-Trent, and they're the biggest private employer in the town, which is pretty cool. But the other thing about Bet365 is that it's profiting from gambling, and gambling fundamentally destroys people's lives. So there's a lot of ambivalence. It's an interesting one. I feel like everyone should discuss it over the breakfast table.
Well, yeah, you're right. And I suppose it's problem gambling that causes the problems. It's still legal and regulated, I guess. But anyway, so many issues there to dig under. But let's move on and bring Yasmin in. I did notice you were nodding quite a lot during what Marianne was saying there. But should we move on to the next story that you wanted to talk about, which actually is on the same page of the Eye, isn't it? And this was some of the details that came out of the latest census. I think it was the first time that it asked people about their sexual orientation and gender identity. So the results are in.
Yeah, so there are 2 or 3 things to say about that, because, there's been an almighty, unending culture war over the whole trans issue and womanhood and femaleness and so on, and that's likely to carry on. But I think over the time we've kind of been given the impression that there's a whole extraordinary movement of increasing numbers of trans people. 2 things. I'm really pleased the census is recognizing people who identify as trans or non-binary, because I think that's kind of giving them, that validates their existence in our population. And whatever your views are, I think it's important. I remember for years, nobody counted mixed race people at all in the census. And the first time they did it, it felt like a huge relief for mixed race people. And I imagine trans people will. But the number is interesting. I was astonished. According to this census, about 262,000 people self-identify as non-binary. I would have thought there would be at least 2 million. This is why the censuses are so good. They kind of correct the way people think about numbers of various people in the population. But I also want to say that this miserable, wretched battle that goes on between trans rights and feminism, both of who groups have a case, I hope this kind of begins to go this year. That's my view.
Okay, yes, and it certainly is going to be a debate that will continue. But yes, interesting results. 262,000 people said their gender identity was different from their sex registered at birth. So we haven't got a huge amount of time, but let's crack on to the Express. Marianne, US green light for Alzheimer's wonder drug.
Yeah, so this is the drug lecanemab, I think that's how you say it, which has been given the green light. It's been approved by the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration in the US. And what this does is it targets the amyloid proteins that get built up in the brain when you suffer from Alzheimer's disease. And so the hope is that the transformation for patients and the slowing of the progress of Alzheimer's has been quite remarkable. There are some side effects and it is quite expensive, but the hope is that perhaps if this gets rolled out in the US, it will also come to the UK to be considered for inclusion in provision by the NHS.
Okay.
And so there's a bill that comes with it, but there's hope for people who are suffering a horrible quality of life because of
Absolutely.
Alzheimer's.
Okay, I'm going to end on the word hope. It's always such a nice place to end. Really lovely to see you both this morning. Thanks so much for all your